Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch It, and last year Longines released the 39mm version of the very popular Spirit Zulu Time, and I fell in love with it, and on the wrist it was way better than I could have expected, and the refinement is just through the roof. But then in early December, a limited edition titanium version was released, and me being the titanium fiend that I am, I knew I had to get it because it was pretty much everything I could have hoped for. So in this video, I'm going to get into what this watch is all about by going over the dimensions on the wrist feel, dial case, bracelet, all the good stuff, because they're all amazing. But I'm also going to try to understand why a watch like this isn't being bought. So yeah, let's get into it. So let's do the dimensions first as always, and it's basically exactly the same as the standard steel 39mm Spirit Zulu Time in that it's 39.1mm across with a lug-to-lug of 46.8mm and a case thickness of 13.4mm, including the domed sapphire crystal. All great numbers over here. But of course that means that it's got the same 21mm lug width, which isn't ideal, but it does taper 5mm down to 16mm at the clasp, which is awesome, and more details about that and the bracelet later on. And of course the big selling point over here is that the whole thing is grade 5 titanium, so it feels really light, and I love it for that. It comes in at 94 gram size for my 7.5-inch wrist or my 19cm wrist. And just for comparison, the steel version, which is also a super comfortable watch and it's not extremely heavy or anything like that, it comes in at 144 grams, which is more than a 50% increase compared to the titanium. That is just next level stuff. The sensation of lightness is strong with this one because not all titanium watches give you the same experience, because my 42mm beloved Pelagos is 146 grams, which for a big 42mm dive watch is very light, but because of that steel case back and the clasp, it's still a familiar weight. It could have been lighter basically. And yet on the wrist, I forget that it's even there. It's unbelievably comfortable. This can stay on my wrist 24/7 all year with zero issues because of the weight. Oh, and the movement is the same COSC certified L844 movement, and it's been ridiculously accurate, less than a second a day. And yeah, just round of applause for that, please. I mean, that's incredible performance. And now let's do the dial, and it's what they call an anthracite dial, which is basically a light matte black, and the steel version has a darker matte black color. Either way, I'm a fan because the polished bevel inside of the minute track is still here, and it's just such a thoughtful detail that looks so good, but it also ties in with the other polished bevels on the case and the bracelet. Next up are the hands and indices, and they are polished, but they have a darker hue compared to the steel version, and I'm glad that this change was made because polished steel hands and indices would have looked a little bit too bright on this watch, considering that titanium is a darker metal than steel. I've said this before and I'll say it again, I love these numerals so much because it's just such a nice change of pace, you know, from all my dive watches. Also, the standard time-only titanium Spirit Time has a gilt dial, which looks great, but I'm glad that this version doesn't have a gilt dial because it keeps things a bit more modern and it doesn't take away from the yellow GMT hand, which I think looks fantastic. I like yellow accents, and it's only on the top third of the GMT hand, so it is quite subtle, all things considered. But the big change here is the simplified dial text and dormant, and yeah, this wouldn't have happened without Hodinkee, so credit where credit is due, because at the 12 side, the applied wing logo and the automatic text are gone, and in place of that is just the chronometer, and the very controversial 5 stars are also gone, which will make many of you very, very happy. And they swapped in the chronometer for automatic, but overall it's 4 lines instead of 6 lines of text / thing. So yeah, thumbs up. And finally, the date window is now at the 3 o'clock position instead of the 6, which I'm not too worried about because I don't hate date windows, and 3 o'clock is pretty standard for a date window, so I'm all for it. And now onto the case and bezel, and we'll start off with the bezel because that, alongside the dial that we just talked about, makes up the elephant in the room, because some people have pointed out that it looks like a Black Bay Pro. And yes, when I saw this at first, it did remind me of the Black Bay Pro, considering I owned one and I also owned the Explorer 2 Polar Dial, but I love this Spirit Zulu time for the same reasons. It's a metal bezeled GMT watch. In general, I like steel bezeled watches. I put on a steel bezel on my SKX for that reason. And as far as I know, Rolex hasn't trademarked the steel bezel colored GMT hand combo. So to say that this is just another Explorer 2 is a bit much. It's kind of like saying that any black dial, black bezeled watch is just another Submariner.
Also, Future rated over here, and I cannot believe that I forgot to mention the fact that the first time I ever wore it, it really reminded me of the really old school Longines pilot's watches that I've seen in like Air Force museums and things like that, but they all had rotating bezels. So I dug in a little bit more, did some research, and it turns out that Longines actually invented and patented the rotatable bezel 1929 and 1935 respectively. Yeah, so if anyone has the right to make a metal rotating bezel on a pilot's watch, it's Longines.
Because as a unit, if you step back, it really is completely different. The only similarities are the use of yellow and it being all one metal, I guess. The bezel is the biggest upgrade for me because first, I really like the typeface and the squares. It really suits the numerals on the dial, but the main thing is that it is rotatable. And this for me is just so useful because I use it to time things, but also if you quickly want to track at different time zones, just rotate it instead of having to go through the whole kerfuffle of unscrewing it, taking out the crown, jumping the hours, or having to reset the time, setting the GMT hand, and then resetting. No, just rotate the bezel, it's easier. The non-rotatable Black Bay Pro bezel was one of the reasons why I sold it, and for my use case, a Flyer GMT without a rotatable bezel is just not very useful at all. I mean, it looks cool, but doesn't work necessarily very well for me. And now onto the case. It's relatively simple, but it has that Omega style spicy brush finish that is next level, and it has some mega bevels running alongside the top of the case, and it's truly incredibly well done. The transitions are sharp. I can't stop looking at them. Can't stand them. No. So to see that brush finish and to see all these intricate bevels done on a titanium watch, which is hard to work on, just ups my respect for Longines. I really hope that they continue to make more titanium watches because they clearly know how to work titanium. And now onto the bracelet, and it's the same bracelet as the steel version, but of course it's fully titanium, even the clasp. And man, can you feel the lightness when compared to the steel bracelet? It's 39 grams versus 67 grams for the steel one. That's incredible, and the feeling of those fully articulating links is silkier because of that, and once again, you forget that the watch is even on your wrist. As for the design, it's an oyster style bracelet, which wouldn't have been as interesting without those polished inner edges of the links because it adds just the right amount of visual interest and refinement, and it matches the bevels on the rest of the watch. And like on the steel version, this also has that neat proprietary quick release bracelet mechanism where you push one button and the bracelet slides off. It works wonderfully, but of course it would have been much more useful had the lug been 20 millimeters. But instead it's a 21 millimeter bracelet that tapers down to 16 millimeters, which looks fantastic, and it looks proportionally right with the watch head, which is what's really important here. So all in all, I don't really see myself ever really needing to swap out the bracelet. So the bracelet being 21 millimeters across doesn't bother me as much, I suppose. Additionally, one thing design-wise that is much better than the steel version is the much simpler clasp because it doesn't have that giant Longines name emblazoned on the top of it. It's just a subtle wing logo at the top. And yes, I do wish that this had the quick adjust clasp that the Hydro Conquest GMT has because that would have made this watch nearly perfect. But again, I don't feel as much of the need to have that just because it's so light on the wrist and I can place it higher up on my wrist like so if it's getting hot without it feeling heavy like it's gonna fall down because I don't like that feeling of it. It just works better. So I have this section in this video just because, like I've said before, this watch is an incredible watch, and given the success of the Spirit Zulu Time line, I was expecting the 500 pieces to sell out pretty quickly, but here we are almost 1.5 months later, and it's still available, and yeah, I don't know why. I'm truly amazed that this didn't sell out quickly because, I mean, what's not to like about this watch? The Spirit Zultime line is very popular. It's a great color combo, it's grade 5 titanium, and the price is good. And before anyone says anything about the price jump between the steel Spirit Zultime and this is less than the price jump between the time-only steel Spirit Time and the titanium time-only Spirit Time. So there's that. Oh, and the very controversial 5 stars on the dial are gone too. So yeah, I mean, I guess let's just say that maybe this watch is super, super polarizing, which it can be, I suppose, but not really. But I still think that there are 500 folks out there who would like this watch enough to buy it. So the only reasons that I can think for this not selling is that this is titanium, or some folks think that Rolex and Tudor owns this color combo, and finally maybe some people just really don't like Hodinkee. But yeah, so much so that they would deny themselves a watch that they like, and also especially because the only mention of Hodinkee is on the case back, and I never look at the case backs of my watches. For me, at the moment, I don't mind Hodinkee, I suppose. Although over the last few years, they have changed a lot, which was a little bit disappointing for me. And that's because I was a huge fan of theirs back in the day, because it was Hodinkee that led me into this horological rabbit hole with the likes of Jack Forster, Joe Thompson, Cara Barrett, Stephen J. Pulverance, Jason Heaton, James Stacey, who's still writing at Hodinkee, and then also Ben Clymer was writing at that time as well. Things just aren't the same. So for that reason, this being a Hodinkee limited edition is neither here nor there for me. I just see a fantastic watch. So yeah, let me know what you think about this watch and Hodinkee in general, whatever you want, down in the comments. And as always, hit the like button and subscribe button, as a lot more is going to be happening in 2024. And until the next video, good day.